Originally debuting back in 1996, Pokémon has been an enduring phenomenon for the whole of its life, and it's one of the few franchises that even non-gamers are guaranteed to recognize. Because it's been around so long, it's easy to just accept everything that the world offers at face value and not really dig into it any deeper. However, if you do just that, there's a lot of unexpected information hiding under the surface. For example, now that the extended Pokémon universe has just over 1,000 monsters in total, there are loads of them to choose from that are exceptionally weird, especially in the later generations when it became clear that they were just running out of ideas and started giving objects laying around the office a face and calling it a day. Nevertheless, for this list we've done our best to explore the archives and pick the ones that we think are the strangest of the bunch, which we've chosen not only because of their appearance, but by how bizarre and occasionally traumatizing their various Pokédex entries are. With that in mind, I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are the 10 strangest Pokémon of all time. Number 10. Sudowoodo. To start out with, we've got a mon that looks a bit more goofy than strange, but gets weirder with closer examination. As its name suggests, Sudowoodo has taken on the appearance of a tree in order to hide and ambush anyone who walks near, but despite looking as though it would be a grass type, it's actually rock. One of the main problems with its disguise is that no matter the season, its leafy bits are always green, so since it doesn't look like any of the evergreens, it gives itself away immediately. That in itself is a bit weird, but then there's the fact that Sudowoodo hates water and is in fact weak to it. Why anything would disguise itself as a plant when water hurts it is beyond me, but I suppose sometimes the world just doesn't make sense. By far the strangest thing about this not a tree though is the fact that according to Ultra Sun's Pokédex, it's so popular with the elderly that there's a magazine devoted to it, mainly for examining the length of its arms. I'm hoping that this means it's some sort of gardening magazine or the like, because if not, I really do not want to know what the Poké Elders are getting up to in their spare time. Number 9. Pyukumuku. At first glance, the small round Pokemon that is Pyukumuku really doesn't look like much at all. It does have a little bit on it that looks like a rabbit tail and a bunch of spikes coming off it, but that in itself isn't all that weird, and it's not like it's the only monster in the Pokédex that looks like a drop of water or just a blob. All that may be true, but the one thing that sets Pyukumuku apart from its peers is the way it attacks. The thing is, this little blob is technically based on a sea cucumber, which explains how it looks. It also explains that, as part of its attack, it spews out some of its own internal organs in order to punch its enemies with them or engulf and consume them. Oh, and if it really does fully take after its actual life counterparts, that's not a mouth that it's spewing its own guts from. Begs the question, why are there eyes there then? It just goes to show that you can't even trust the unassuming ones, because as soon as you do, you'll get a stomach to the face. Number 8. Claydol. Another Pokemon whose name rather succinctly describes what it is, Claydol is in fact an old doll made out of mud or clay that has come to life thanks to a mysterious ray of light. This in and of itself is a quite bizarre origin story, though I suppose it isn't the only time that humans have been involved in the creation of a Pokemon. What makes it even weirder is the powers that this very same ray apparently gave to its sentient lump of earth. Now that it has turned into an animal, I think, Claydol has gained the ability to levitate thanks to its newfound telekinetic powers. It can attack now as well, and is able to detach its arms and send out strong beams from both of its hands. Also, distressingly, the body is still susceptible to water and will melt when it gets wet, which seems like a bit of an oversight given it can do so many other things once given its sentience. To cap it all off, Claydol is massive, standing at a height of nearly 5 feet despite it supposedly being a doll. Whether it was this tall originally or grew thanks to the magic in the light beam, we may never know, but either way, that makes it so much more disconcerting. Number 7. Scrafty. One quick look at Scrafty is enough to see that it's a bit of a weird one. With a massive crest on its head, its dissatisfied mouth, and it holding up something that looks like a bag, it doesn't look like anything else in the Pokemon world, except for its earlier version Scraggy, but that doesn't count. This dark fighting type hangs around in groups, and the one with the largest crest on its head is the leader. While they are quite aggressive, attacking by either spitting acid from their mouths or using their powerful kicks, which can shatter concrete in order to dissuade foes from attacking, they're extremely protective of each other. None of this this is really all that strange, I suppose, but remember that thing that Scrafty is holding on to? The one that looks a bit like a bag or maybe a pair of ill-fitting trousers? Well, that's actually a bit of its own skin that it shed, which it uses to protect itself while it's busy kicking its enemies. Hanging on to a bit of your own dead skin is strange enough, but it makes it even weirder that the Pokies not only use this for protection, but that it actually seems to work. If I tried to fight with my own shed skin around my knees, I'd probably do more damage to myself, so well done, Scrafty, even if you are a bit disgusting for doing it. Number 6. Mawile. Something that the whole Pokemon universe is really good at doing is hiding something incredibly sinister in something that looks like a plush toy. To some extent, that's also true of Mawile, because from the front it doesn't look all that intimidating. As soon as you notice the conspicuous teeth concealed in what looks like its ponytail though, that all goes out the window. The back mouth is strange enough on its own, but it doesn't stop there. It just so happens that the hair that it's in is technically a weird mutated horn, and that the mouth is just a deadly evolutionary quirk. Of course, most Pokemon have a mouth of some sort, so that alone isn't all that noteworthy. However, Mawile can't actually taste anything with it, so it mostly uses its huge chomping jaws to swallow things whole that it doesn't like. On the off chance that it does choose to chew on something instead, it's so strong that it can chew through steel beams, so nothing stands much of a chance of escaping. Let's just say that after this, I hope that I won't have to look at this particular Pokemon for Mawile. What? Yeah? That was a terrible joke, sorry. Let's move on. Number 5. Vanillish. So far we've been steering clear of most of the Pokemon that look like random objects, but well, we're going to change that right now. The first and most obvious strange thing about Vanillish is that it's literally an ice cream with a face. That's weird enough, yes, but there's something about its large eyes and gaping mouth that makes it extra uncomfortable to look at. Unsurprisingly, Vanillish attacks by using a variety of ice attacks on its foes. However, it doesn't just make them a bit cold, as it's capable of freezing enemies down to an incredibly brisk minus 100 degrees Celsius or minus 148 degrees Fahrenheit if you want to get American about this. Don't worry though, because it's a kind Pokemon that doesn't actually kill foes after this. Probably because it doesn't need to at that point, but never mind. This is yet another Pokemon that is highly susceptible to the weather, similar to Claydol earlier, and it will melt if out on hot days. Vanillish is strange looking enough when it hasn't been melted, so I can't imagine the sort of absolute nightmare fuel it would turn into as a melty pile of ice cream. Just be careful not to get any of it on your hands. Imagine the horrible implications that would bring along with it. Number 4. Mr. Mime. Let's be honest with ourselves here, who hasn't had multiple nightmares about Mr. Mime suddenly appearing in your bedroom and menacing you with its terrible clown face and silly routines? With its wide smile, elfish shoes, uncomfortable gloved hands, and head that features something that could be either hair, bat wings, or terrible wobbly horns, there's almost no way that this little weirdo isn't, well, weird. Impressively, it can create walls as long as the one watching its miming believes in them hard enough. Shame they're invisible though, because I really do wish I could put a wall between me and it so I wouldn't have to look at it any longer. As if its general demeanor wasn't enough to put you off, there's also the fact that this Pokemon has the absolute audacity to slap anyone who interrupts its miming, something you'll have to do if you want to catch it or go back to having the perfectly pleasant picnic you were enjoying before this menace showed up. And that's just the games as well. Outside of that, there's the Mr. Mime in the Detective Pikachu movie, which is hands down one of the most unsettling things that I've ever had to look at in my life. Don't worry though, the entries only get more uncomfortable from here. Number 3. Girafarig. Seems that Mawile wasn't the only Pokemon content with having more than one mouth, because now we have Girafarig. Much in the same way as Mawile, if you look at it from the front, it actually seems like quite a cute little giraffe-based animal, but it's harboring something quite nasty in its strange round tail. Look closely and you'll notice that the tail has its own face. This isn't just some decoration or mechanism for scaring off predators though, because this second head literally has a mind of its own. That's right, this particular Pokemon has a second brain in its tail, but it's apparently too small for thinking. This doesn't mean that it won't do anything though, and it actually is quite a clever defense mechanism in and of itself. Though it can't do much of its own accord, the tail never sleeps and lashes out to bite at any threats that may try to come up from the rear, even if the other half is asleep. This makes it basically impossible to sneak up on Girafarig because its tail is always on the lookout for threats. I imagine it would make a handy guard dog though. Number 2. Drifloon. In Japanese folklore, there's an entire group of supernatural beings that possess old, discarded items and animate them in order to take their revenge on the humans that abandoned them. This does go some way to explain why so many Pokemon are things that have been possessed by spirits, but it doesn't make them any less uncomfortable to think about. Even with all those haunted Pokemon to choose from though, Drifloon is still one of the most traumatizing ones around, because being a spirit in a balloon is actually the most normal thing about it, and it only gets worse from there. It's not just a single person's soul that has inhabited a Drifloon, because these floating horror shows are actually formed from an amalgamation of both human and Pokemon souls, all mixed into some sort of supernatural soup inside its floating body. Perhaps because of all this ill will and mixed consciousness, they go around stealing children, carrying them off into the sky never to be seen again. Even popping the balloon doesn't make it any better, and not just because of the moral implications, because this will just cause all of the souls inside the balloon to spill out in a horrifying scream. That means that Drifloon is by far one of the most menacing creatures in the Pokemon kingdom, but it still isn't quite enough to be called the strangest. Number 1. Mimikyu. By far the most famous strange Pokemon of the lot, as well as being the strangest overall, Mimikyu is an anomaly in almost every way, not the least of which because no one actually knows what the real creature looks like, or at the very least, they aren't in any condition to share. As you may already be aware, the actual Mimikyu is underneath that makeshift Pikachu sheet, and as far as anyone can tell without actually looking and putting themselves in harm's way, it's some kind of shadow creature and possibly even a ghost. Unfortunately, Pokemon trainers are unlikely to ever know for sure, because trying to look at its true form will anger it, and actually managing to get a glimpse will strike the person catching the sneak peek down with a serious illness or worse. Mimikyu also tends to hide not only under its sheet, but in dark places as well, as sunlight seems to harm it, so that way it can be doubly protected. This standoffishness combined with their general unknowable nature makes them a true oddity in the Pokemon world. It is kind of strangely cute with the cloth over it, but with the risk of grievous bodily harm, I think I'd have to pass on having one as a pet.